Today in this video, I'm going to be covering the sewing process of how I recreated King George III's waistcoat. I'll put in the description below the pattern books and any construction books that helped me throughout. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So you want to start by sewing the outer and lining fabric for your back panel, just sewing it across the center back. These are then put to one side for later. So moving on to the front panels, you want to add an iron-on canvas onto your button wrap and the base of your waistcoat. This will give it a nice clean shape when it's done. Once that's in place, it's time to move on to the pockets. Before cutting open your pockets, you want to add a cotton interfacing to that area. This can then be cut open. Once the fabric's cut, sew the pocket bags right side together along that slash. Flipping the fabrics onto the inside and adding an understitch onto the lower pocket bag. To finish the pocket bag, add 2 stitches around it just for reinforcement. With the pockets in place, it's then time to move on to the pocket flaps. Before you sew these pocket flaps together, you want to add the trims onto them. The trimming I used was a sequin one, which I cut the sequins off just so I could use the upper braid. This was then sewn above the trim that I used for the rest of the waistcoat, just to create a similar pattern to what was on the original waistcoat. With that in place, add an interfacing onto one side of each pocket flap. Then with right sides together, sew the pocket flaps around, bag them out, and add a slip stitch to finish, attaching them to the waistcoat just above the pocket. The next step is to add the trimming onto the waistcoat. Using a back stitch, I sewed the trim on either side of the trim edge just to make sure it was secure enough. With the trim in place, it's then time to move on to adding the lining to both of those front panels. For the inside of those front panels, it consisted of a facing made from the Duchess satin and then the rest of the lining. So to get that lining in place, start by adding your facing to that lining, then with right sides together of both the front panel and the lining panel, sew them together, then bag them out, pressing it once it's been bagged out. Before we attach the front and back panels together, it's a matter of sewing the jiggers. For these, you want to iron on a canvas or interfacing, then sew right side together, bagging it out. These are then basted into place on the side seams. Now onto the most tedious part of sewing the waistcoat. You want to sandwich your front panels into the outer fabric of your back panel and the lining fabric of your back panel. Once everything's inside those 2 panels, baste around the entire thing just so the fabric doesn't slip. Then you want to sew around the entire thing, leaving a side seam open on the lining of the back panel so you can bag the entire thing out. Finish that seam that's open with a slip stitch. With the waistcoat fully constructed, it's a matter of adding the eyelets into the jigger on the back, as well as the buttons and the buttonholes. The buttonholes I chose to use were the keyhole buttonholes. You can do this either by machine or hand, but working with a Duchess satin, you probably want to use a machine. And with that, you'll have a finished King George waistcoat. If you would like to stick around to see how I made the rest of the costume, be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.